Hello and welcome to another edition of The New Frontier. We're recording this the day before Black Friday, so everyone in the e-commerce industry is probably stressing about Black Friday, and I hope it goes well for everyone listening. But we are here to give you some relief from that, to talk about something which I think you'll find super interesting. And to do that, we've got a very special guest. So we have with us Zahra Shah. She is an AI frontier and technology expert, an entrepreneur, a board director, NED, advisor, investor, and speaker. She serves as an expert member of the Technology Advisory Panel at the Information Commissioner's Office, where she advises the ICO on privacy implications and the nuanced applications of frontier technologies, with a focus on our favorite topic, AI and generative AI. Specifically personal data processing, business innovation, and information rights. When I met her a couple of weeks back, she was testifying, if that's the right word for it, or appearing in the House of Lords to kind of advise on AI policy. So very excited to hear how that all went. But yeah, Zahra, welcome.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure to meet you at the Future of AI Investors event.
Yeah, and I mean, you had a very impressive kind of PDF, which was maybe 3 pages of all the stuff you've done. Is there anything I missed there in terms of like your background when it comes to the AI space that you'd wanna kind of go a bit deeper on before we get into it?
I think you covered it very well. Apart from the public sector, I also serve
Okay.
on boards on the private sector as well as the third sector.
Nice. So maybe we can start it there then. So you were off to the House of Lords, I think the day after we met at that dinner. Do you want to maybe start and explain why you went and what you were talking about, and then we can kind of get into like the AI regulatory landscape?
Sure. I was invited by UK AI, which is a trade association for the AI sector in the UK. And the roundtable was focusing on the key areas involved within AI regulation. And the aim and purpose of the roundtable was to accumulate feedback from various different stakeholders from the public sector, private sector, third sector, as well as the AI, industry, various sizes of organizations from the AI sector in the UK, get their feedback, and then produce a report which includes policy recommendations to help the government.
And I don't want to ask too political questions, but do you have the sense that the people you're testifying to have any idea what they're talking about in this space?
Yes, they do. We had the former AI minister present there, and then also, we had members from the current government as well. And there is awareness of AI. There's a lot of interest in AI, but there's also concern about how we can address some of the risks and challenges.
So yeah, how is the UK then thinking about this? And maybe you can start with what the UK is doing, and also what's happening internationally as well.
Sure. So currently, the UK's AI policy encompasses the 4 key regulators: ICO, FCA, CMA, and Ofcom, regulating AI within the remit, within the jurisdiction. The ICO is a lead regulator for AI, and the policy is a principles-based approach. So it looks at regulating AI with a view to ensure that AI applications are developed using principles such as explainability, transparency, privacy, governance, credibility, redress, security, etc. And we don't have a regulation as such in place at the moment, but we have certain standards, developed by the AI Safety Institute, as well as a lot of guidance published by the ICO with respect to both AI and generative AI. So that's the current situation in the UK. And then I can talk about, if you want me to.
Yeah, please. How does it compare? Yeah, how does it compare?
How we fit in. So a lot of your, I think listeners might be aware of this fact that the EU has the EU AI Act in place. This act takes a risk-based approach, which means it classifies AI systems based on the risk being high, medium, or low, and there are details you can go into that classification. But there are limitations of this risk-based approach because
Mm.
AI systems are very dynamic. They're not like normal technology systems. And a system that is classified as low risk, very quickly the risk can change to high risk if it's not used properly, if the data is inaccurate, if it's not trained properly. So they're very dynamic depending on how they're utilized. So this regulation, which will be which will come into basically it'll be enforced next year, early next year,
Mm.
if towards the end of January or early February next year, something like that. And uh, it will be very difficult to enforce and implement it across all the different member states. And for the UK, it poses more of a complication because we no longer a member state, and if we were a member state, it would be something that we could work with. We can provide our input or feedback if we had issues with implementing it or enforcing it in action. But because we no longer a member state, it creates a further problem for us because we don't really have a say. We
Mm.
have to work with the regulation, which might be very hard to enforce, and we can't really influence how some of those risks can be mitigated. For example, with the ICO, if the public have some concerns or they provide feedback, the ICO always listens. They take the feedback into account, and they do issue detailed guidance or updated guidance. So I'm just giving you an example that if you are dealing with a regulation and regulator where you don't have a say, it's going
Mm.
to be very difficult. And then in the US, under Trump basically mentioned that in his campaign that he would repeal the executive order issued by Biden.
Mhm.
And so he's very much looking towards an environment of no or minimal AI regulation. That is what we are hearing from the US administration. So this leaves UK in a very interesting, and I would say very historic situation. I think UK can utilize this moment by looking at the challenges that this geopolitical situation poses with overregulation in Europe and potentially no minimal regulation in the US. UK can take the middle path and
Mhm.
learn from these challenges by actually leading in this area. They can do that by ensuring that they come up with AI regulation that is balanced, that is
Mm.
innovation friendly, that is principles based, that really takes into account the greater public good, because we don't want to be in a situation where there's no regulation, because then people don't trust that environment. It's very hard to identify for people with all a million models on Hugging Face, for example. How do people identify which one that is right for them? How do they use the
Mm.
right model? Or there's so many suppliers now, so how do they identify who is the right supply for them if there is no regulation? So it creates a issue of trust. And if you have very difficult to implement an over regulation, that creates an issue as well, because then it's very hard for innovation to take place. So UK can actually take the middle path and come up with an AI regulation that I would say fosters ethical innovation, AI
Mm.
innovation, and also protects the greater public good.
So it's very some interesting points there, and I mean, firstly on the EU, which you mentioned, um, the EU, well, companies such as Meta are already not publishing their latest AI models in the EU, so they've not published the latest Llama in the EU because the EU's regulation. There's also, I'm not particularly sympathetic to the likes of Meta, but I am very sympathetic to my fellow founders, and I know that many of my European founders are very stressed out about this regulation because of the burden it puts on small companies to basically report on their training and all of this kind of stuff to the EU. And if you're a small company and you haven't raised funding, you don't have 3 months and 25,000 euros to kind of work with a third party who's going to help you publish this to to a central body in the EU. Like it's an absolute innovation and kind of startup killer. So I understand the risks the problems there. And I don't know what I mean. It's going to be very interesting. Like, do you think the EU potentially is going to be left behind one of the biggest technology revolutions we've seen since, steam engines?
It might have an impact exactly from what you described. It might have an impact because, as you very rightly said, for a lot of the AI startups, it's going to make it so difficult for them.
Yeah.
And already, if I look at the evidence, for example, London is already considered to be the Silicon Valley of Europe. If you look at all the investment,
I would disagree with that wholeheartedly.
if you,
Okay.
I'm referring to
I hope it was. I hope it was.
I'm referring to reports actually that were
Okay.
on the London Tech Week. Obviously, it might have changed, so I can share that
Wow.
with you afterwards. So London, according to a lot of the reports,
Fair.
by London and Partners. I'm trying to remember Tech UK.
Fair enough. I mean, having lived in Silicon Valley for 4 months, the tech scene in Silicon Valley and San Francisco and the Bay Area compared to London is really like chalk and
Oh,
cheese.
I'm not talking about the US. I just said, I'll clarify.
Okay. Yeah.
London is considered the second Silicon Valley of Europe.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that, and the report on it, I can share the report with you afterwards. That was launched under Tech UK that has all of the statistics. But the report mentioned something like even in the third quarter, just in a quarter, the London actually had access to the highest amount of AI investment in the whole of Europe. That's just for that sector, and then technology sector as a whole. And I think the reason behind this is that Europe generally, the environment provided by Europe is not for some reason conducive to tech ventures, tech startups. After London, the report mentioned the other hubs in Europe are Berlin, but again, nowhere near that activity. But you're absolutely right. The top hubs in the world are Silicon Valley, New York, and then London.
Yeah, I mean, it's from my lived experience there, it's honestly incomparable.
Of course,
and it's a real shame as a British person. I wish that London was a tech hub. I sincerely hope it will be, and I hope what you're doing, can help us get there with this AI governance. But I mean, it's incomparable in many aspects in terms of.
But it is number 3 in the world. That's huge, So after Silicon Valley, New York, London is and the hub in Europe. So that shows you that if the EU AI Act was enforced and implemented, it is going to be even more difficult for the European countries to
definitely
sustain innovation. The other issue London has always had, and something that the tech sector and the government can collaborate to work on, that at Series B and Series C, we always lose our tech companies when scaling up to the US because it's very hard for them to find the Series B and Series C investors in London, and also to successfully IPO. They always go to the US. So we lose a lot of homegrown ventures.
100%. And I think this is a slightly separate point, but this is a point which I think many legislators don't understand, which is we live in a global world and companies can relocate to wherever they want to relocate, and putting additional pressures on companies just means you're forcing people to move it elsewhere. But in terms of the AI, so I understand the EU, and I think the path they're going down is really kind of, in my opinion, shooting themselves in the foot, and that they'll look back in 50 years and the quality of life for the average person, I imagine, will be significantly worse, because they just haven't got all the innovation that is going to happen elsewhere that's going to help to give people access to healthcare on demand and education, like personalized education, all these benefits that are going to come. Obviously there's tons of risks we'll talk about, but all these benefits which are clearly going to happen with technological innovation as it has in history. But in terms of the risks, so you said there's like 1 million or 100 million models on Hugging Face.
A million, not
a million. But I think this is where we need to be careful, right? Because there's a difference, as you well know, between kind of like frontier AI, which is potentially more intelligent than any human, and therefore agentic in nature and can take action on itself, and the kind of models we have on Hugging Face, which are the vast majority of them generative AI. So they're generating text, they're generating images, like we've, the world has seen ChatGPT now for 2 years. Like what are the real risks from people just playing with these models? Because I mean, like I don't see any I can't point to, and maybe you can, like an instance of someone using a large language model like ChatGPT to do anything which is like, noteworthily a terrible thing. Like everyone warned about fake news and fake images in the election, but this has happened without AI, and it seems like really there's a lot more benefits, and like I can point to hundreds of amazing use cases from using this technology in a positive way. And like eComtent, my company, I'd class as one of those. Like we're helping people to improve their speed and scale. But what are the risks of playing with this stuff?
So basically, the risks are really to enterprises or government or to security companies. When you're using, as you said, ChatGPT for your own, private use, what you're doing is you're losing your information, you're losing your privacy. But if you're not really using it uh, by providing any, I would say, confidential data, or you're not using any information that you feel that if it can go up into the public domain, it can be sold, it can be used to create a profile about you, it can be used to target you with different things, then it's okay. If you don't mind losing your personal information and you don't mind being targeted by
But that's not new with AI, right? We've had, like, I agree that's a total issue on privacy, but it's almost a separate issue, no?
Yeah, but because ChatGPT has been, a lot of the data that has been used just from the internet. So it's not data that actually has been verified, or hate, abuse, and profanity has not been removed. It's not developed using data that complies with privacy regulation. It's not developed using data that's actually accurate. A lot of data on the internet is not accurate. It's misinformation. As you know, majority of the information on the internet, you cannot really rely on it until it's checked. So the danger of those models for sort of organizational use is very valid. So for example, if you're a bank, then I would not recommend you use ChatGPT. For a bank, you would
Totally.
exactly, you would
But
need to use a model and an AI system that has compliant data, that complies with privacy regulations, that is accurate, that's not biased, that doesn't have any abuse, hate, profanity. The model also has to be the right size model, because the large language models tend to be more creative. They're very, very expensive to run, and they're very energy inefficient. So you have to look at the right model for your usage. A good example is, let's say your child, you have to drop your child to school. Now you can do that in a bus, on a bicycle, in a car, or in a helicopter, or even in a tow truck, right? But you would use the right you wouldn't use a helicopter to get there if you don't need it. So the idea is that you would use the model that you really don't need such a big model and waste so much money and waste so much energy when you only use 1% of the capability of the model. So that is what I was referring to. And because the other danger is that if organizations are not careful, if they don't comply with copyright law, IP law, regulated organizations like banks and financial institutions, the other FCA regulation, then they will be they can be liable to being sued. So they will have to be very
totally.
careful.
So I see there's a risk on the organizational level, and I agree. Like, it would be very foolish and naive for a bank to use ChatGPT to try and do anything, right? But that's kind of like on the bank's side. But B, like, if they have access to, let's say, 1 million models on Hugging Face, surely they can fine tune them, play with them. You can code in accuracy versus RAG. It's never going to be perfect, but like you can, like, for in the case of us, like, we have a large language model in e-commerce. For e-commerce, there's certain phrases you can't say on marketplaces. Like, you don't want to make claims like your product's going to cure cancer. You're not allowed to say like a fantastic deal, buy it now, or there's certain elements you can't say on a if you're listing stuff on Amazon or Walmart or whatever. And obviously, if you use ChatGPT, you run the risk of that being present. But with a bit of fine tuning and RAG, you can fix those issues to like a 99% accuracy, right? And then you could also put a human in the loop. So what is the risk of people playing with this like frontier we can talk about, but in terms of like Gen AI, it seems to me it's a fantastic opportunity if you assume that most people have good intentions, which I do. Surely it's an amazing opportunity for people to just innovate and explore, and like, yes, like they shouldn't be using the raw ChatGPT model, but a technology person in a bank could do some fine tuning, and they could build a great chatbot for their customers, for example.
Sure, that they can do that, but also you have to realize that these models, AI systems are not like normal systems. They're very hard to implement and to train and tune and deploy and to govern. You need people with AI
Yep.
expertise, and that's
Yes. Yeah.
uh, our skill set, which is not readily available at present. People are getting trained. One example is actually the IBM Watson X platform, which I've used for the financial services sector, which works very well. The reason it works very well and allows you to do everything that you mentioned, because it has these three components. It has the AI Studio, where you can utilize any model from, as you mentioned, from Hugging Face, any model.
Yep.
You can use IBM's own model, which is Granite, or you can use any other model, and you can train, tune those models to make sure you actually can train them using the bank's own data. So you can utilize Watson X AI Studio to tune the model, train the model using the data within the bank. And then it has a data component, which is like a data warehouse or lakehouse that allows you to ensure that all the data that goes into your AI system is compliant with privacy regulations. It removes any hate, profanity, abuse. So you are, covered. And then the most important aspect for me is that it has a governance component. And what that allows you to do is allows you to govern all of your AI workflows across the entire organization. So if there's any issue, let's say an issue comes up around drift of the model, so it will notify, you can see in the dashboard the RAG status, and then you can mitigate that concern when it comes, and then as you mentioned, and you can keep on using it. So yes, it is possible. There, as I mentioned, I just gave an example of the Watson X responsible AI platform, because it's targeted for enterprises, especially within
And
regulated.
there's definitely different needs for small, let's say, small Amazon sellers, an individual who's running a business like $1 million a year or 10 million a year, like maybe an outfit of 1 to 5 people, have different needs. Obviously, for enterprises that need to do a lot more compliance, and they have thousands of people across the world and hundreds of millions or billions in revenue. But what do you think that we need in, like, when we talk about generative AI? There's, as you know, and there's kind of many different stages of or types of AI, and like I feel there's confusion. It's, in my personal opinion, I feel there's confusion in terms of the regulatory space, where I hear politicians or people in the EU talking about AI, and generative AI is quite a benign thing. It will just predict the next word or the next pixel. And when we talk about kind of agentic AI that's taking its own actions, like, yes, like, it's a different conversation. But what do you think governance needs to be in the generative AI space? If
You're absolutely right. Actually, that's something we discussed at the roundtable as well. That there needs to be a distinction between the traditional or what we call sort of predictive AI or traditional AI space, and then you have the generative AI, and the risks of the traditional AI are much lower. I agree. Compared to generative.
And even predictive AI, you could say, is harder, because I can understand the argument of people who may, and I don't, I think these have largely been fixed, but people would say, for example, when Amazon in like 10 years ago, they launched their a predictive AI model where they would kind of assess CVs, and it would bias towards men because that's what the majority of the people who they were hiring for were. So you'd have this predictive AI model which can like assign people, and this is not new, like banks have this or like your insurance will have this to work out your insurance quote. Like these exist, and they've existed for 10 years. So I think there's almost more risks there than generative AI, which is kind of like, as you say, it's a wild beast to train. I know this. We spent 2 years training them, and in many ways, the implementation therefore is limited. Like, as a business, you see it's limited because it's of the reliability. But on the flip side, they're super creative. they've captured the public imagination. It's why like all these discussions are happening. But they're not. Like I'd even say predictive AI is more dangerous than generative AI. No.
Yeah, I agree with you that we need to differentiate. And
Yeah.
also, maybe what would really help actually is to, I think ChatGPT, one thing they did it very well is to raise the public awareness. A lot
Yes.
of people who are not
Yes.
used to it, but what it also led to is a lot of misinformation or hype. I feel right now we're going through a hype cycle
Mm.
because AI or machine learning technologies are not new. They have
Yes.
existed for a while. It's just the transformational capability. Now with quantum computing, the massive computational power that's coming in, and with obviously the generative models, that kind of capability, this capability that we have seen now, it's new.
Hmm.
Uh, but uh, there needs to be more, I think, awareness and training and skill building. Maybe that's something the government could help with, so that it helps people to understand, exactly the differences,
Hmm.
the benefits of each of the traditional AI, predictive AI, the generative AI, how you can use the different types of AI technologies for your benefit, and how you can mitigate the risk, so that it helps to overcome. Because what hype cycles create, they create fear, and eventually this hype cycle is going to die down. I think from next year onwards, when people start seeing and using
Mm.
some basic use cases, and then they see the value
Yeah.
return on investment, and they see how they're being utilized. So I agree, the education and awareness building piece is very important, so people, you know uh, once people understand, the fear will go away. They will understand. There's a lot of fear around people feeling that it's going to replace them, it's going to lead to a lot of
Yeah.
jobs. In
Well,
cases where people are
that's
worried about, like for
let's
example.
let's talk about that, because that was my next question. So we've talked about generative AI. Like, let's talk about what's coming, which is agentic AI, which is a different beast. And quick definition for the listeners: agentic AI would be AI that can kind of um, take actions independently. You set it a task, it can do stuff. So we've already seen like HubSpot and Salesforce kind of building these AI agent suites. We know there's a bunch of companies like 11x who kind of have this agentic AI in terms of mass emailing and kind of like a traditional BDR role, business development role. At Ecomtent, we're building one for like managing e-commerce. So there's what, and the reason I mentioned it is because what have you said about taking jobs? Do you believe there is going to be a huge displacement in 5 to 10 years of people in jobs, and we basically end up with a large percentage of people who just can't find any work because you have agentic AI, and then you also have, the proliferation of kind of like robots and like the kind of Tesla bot, and so you've kind of got warehousing work gone. You've got a lot of kind of service work in terms of the barista work or anything like this gone, pizza making gone, and like in a kind of knowledge space as well, you've got sales gone, marketing gone. Like, what's your view on this?
So I actually, an interesting way to look at it would be to compare it to, the internet. So if that was a transformation technology. People had same kind of.
It's not the same thing, though.
I know
Yeah.
it's not the same thing, but again, when you look at new technology, human
Mm.
beings have always gone towards progression. You had this coal engines, then you had, the kind of fast trains we have now. So you've always gone through different technological changes and advances. With internet,
Mm.
what we saw is that people who were used to using the old-fashioned typewriter or typing up notes, and
But
that
I get this argument,
with
and I hit.
Microsoft
Yeah.
Office. And again, people were very afraid, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. But actually, you have to retrain yourself. So I agree that this idea that you have a job for life, that you train in one area and you
Mm.
can have a job for life, that will no longer exist. And people will have to take more responsibility to keep themselves upskilled and trained. And I
Yeah.
feel government has to play their role. They have to make sure that if people are losing their job in the future
Mm.
with AI technology coming in, then they need to be reskilled to be, because you will need new people, new knowledge workers. So it's not, basically AI will create new types of jobs. So instead of doing the jobs that we knew, we'll have certain other types of jobs. There will be a AI. You can never rely on a system
Yeah.
100% to do the job for you. So there'll always be human beings supervising, managing, providing intervention, and the most important aspect would be the governance side, because some people would have to be there to ensure that what you get from the system is accurate. And when the system goes haywire, somebody's there to mitigate that risk. And then the output coming out makes sense. The input going in is also accurate. So you will always need people to, you'll always need human intervention.
So I hear this argument, and I'm skeptical,
Mm.
because I think what we've had in the past are tools, right? So you've had, um, the invention of fire, which is a tool, and then steel, so you can like have sharper axes, and then the internet, so now you have emails. These are all tools, and what's coming with AI is fundamentally different, in my opinion. We are going to have an agentic, um, you know, an alien being which is smarter than any human, has all of the information in the world, can act on its own. In a cyber way, they can run a marketing program, and they can crunch numbers that a PhD in a physics PhD couldn't, and
Mm-hmm.
then they could generate images that the best designer couldn't. But
Mm.
also, they're going to have physical presence. They're going to have they're going to be in warehouses, they're going to be in our homes, they're going to be physical robots which are going to be scaled out. And as I said, I spent time in San Francisco. You see this in San Francisco. They have Waymo, the driverless car, kind of zooming around the streets, and like every one in every 10 or 15 cars is a Waymo. It's incredible, like a driverless car. So it's a fundamentally different thing in my mind from saying, oh, here's a new tool. And yes, like through all of these historical periods, you like the Industrial Revolution, what happens is there's no work on the farms anymore, because they've got this new tractor, and therefore like the population moves to the cities. But the speed of change is manageable, so that yes, like there's some upskilling. People go from kind of farming with their hands or whatever it was to like working in a factory and producing textiles. But that, like, the speed of change is slow enough that can happen. What's happening now is not a new tool, but essentially an alien being coming, which is going to be more intelligent than any of us. And therefore, like, I just don't see how this adoption doesn't happen at a much steeper curve, and leaves a significant portion of a population potentially without anything to do.
Yes, that is a very, very serious risk, and that's a risk that the government will need to address. And it's also not just within countries, but also the current digital divide between the developed world and the emerging world or developing world, that is going to widen even more.
Mm.
That's going to be worse. So this is a real concern, and
Mm.
in the long term, and in order to kind of address these challenges, that's another reason why we need to have good AI regulation, which then looks into if a certain application, as you said, is leading to loss of jobs in whole government departments. Then we have to think about, at what stage do you allow the use of that technology, right? So they will have to make certain assessments. How do you make those
Mm.
assessments? You can't always make assessments based on the economic factor, because you also have to look at, fine, this is going to bring in more money for the economy, but at what cost? We want to bring in more money for the economy, but we want people to also be, that money to actually help people lead good lives. If it's leading
Mm.
to a lot of people, losing their jobs, or older people, not being able to live a life of dignity, which is, we saw a lot of that as a result of the pandemic, unfortunately, because as you know, the population is aging. So in some cases, AI can be used to make the life of the elderly better, right?
Mm.
But as more and more people are going to age in this economy, AI can be used in healthcare to make their lives more, to improve their quality of life. So it's almost, you need people to think about not just the monetary aspect of all the fun things that can be done in Silicon Valley and all,
Mm,
we have driverless cars, or that we're getting rid of mini cab drivers or black cab drivers, or whole generation of people losing their jobs. So you have to think about that.
mm.
That a good thing? Is that
How,
really good for your country as a whole? So that is why you need people to also look at the greater public good, to look at the interests of all the
mm,
various groups in your country, the elderly, women, children, people of different sexual, political, religious
yeah,
orientation, people of different age groups, people of different races and ethnic minorities, to make sure that this technology is serving the greater public good for everyone, not
yeah.
just for a small number of people who really are fascinated by what happens in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I worry about terms like the greater public good. But let's so like when I think about this, I also think about climate change, right? And
Mm.
like
Mm.
in some ways, would you agree it's a global problem, it's a cross border, it's and I worry. I just look at how and I know very little about climate change. I'm not an expert at all in this stuff, right? But I look at how it's being dealt with on a global scale, right? In the you have all of these little flying off to various places, Paris and then London, and they were just in some other COP somewhere in Argentina or somewhere like that, and fundamentally nothing gets done. And does that worry you for like how like if we
Mm.
like surely the this kind of climate change is a perfect case study of how like it's it's kind of is not going to be solved on there's no way of doing this successfully on a global level.
Hmm. But at least you make an effort. Just because you think something is
Yeah,
challenging
totally.
doesn't mean you completely, what's the word? Put your head under the covers and
Mm.
say, give up. Oh my God, I will be replaced
Yeah.
by AI. It's the end of the world. I can't do anything. No, you look at the
Mm.
challenges and you then think about how you can overcome them. And in terms of, yes, it has data centers have a
Yeah.
massive, climate impact, but actually there's some positive aspects that quantum computing can help with. AI
Hmm.
and quantum computing can work together to address some of these challenges, especially around climate.
No,
Uh,
I agree. I think we will solve climate change and we'll solve climate change through technology. Like I believe that
Even if
when you
we're
have
not able to, as you said, solve it
yeah
completely on a global scale, which a lot of people think they cannot, at least we're taking steps to mitigate it,
I
make
yeah
it, improve it. Otherwise, you
mm,
see increasing global warming, and we saw that this year as well. Heat waves across Europe.
yeah
So many people died. So we actually living through the negative impact of climate change.
I look yeah I agree. I agree we're living through the impacts and I think humanity is as like in terms of humans will be saved eventually,
Mhm.
whichever percentage are left of them from this through technology. We will innovate, and I think AI will be a big part of that. We'll innovate our way out. We'll have um, when electric cars are just better than petrol, they're faster, they're cleaner, they're cheaper, people will use them.
Mm.
When like again, I'm no expert, but I've read things about sending stuff up into the atmosphere, and again, like if we've got AI super intelligence working on these problems, I think yeah. But my point kind of was in terms of the governments of climate change, like to me, it's just been a total disaster. Like I don't I don't know what your view is, but like on a global world, on a global level, countries like China and India haven't paid attention to anything. From again, I'm not super informed, but it seems like they're building new coal plants every month or every day. Like they're just going on and doing their stuff. Some European, Britain has like relatively meek stuff going on, but at least we're trying to do something. But yeah, we're 2% of the global emissions. Like it's not gonna move the needle. How can we learn from that in terms of AI? Like what can we like what should we be doing differently?
I think, yes, I do agree with you that a lot of the governments under COP, was it COP 24 now? We have
Yeah.
a bunch of pledges, but very little action.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I guess listed companies have to report under ESG reporting
Hmm.
requirements. That's something that they have to do. But actually, maybe what would actually help is that we work in collaboration and partnership. So you private sector, public sector, and the third sector work together. Because as you rightly said, we just cannot rely on just one stakeholder, the government, to
What's the
address
third sector?
the charity sector, the
Okay,
non-profit
got
sector.
it. Yeah.
Because often in some countries where the governments have not been very effective in certain dealing with certain challenges, like South Asia, I've seen that the third sector has actually, filled the hole. So I would say working in collaboration with all the key sector within your community,
Mm,
because it is, after all, we have to take responsibility, because we will be bearing the consequences, as well as a future generation.
mm,
We want to create and leave behind a better world for them. We do not want to leave a world where you feel that it's not even a good place to bring more children in.
yeah.
So from that point of view, it's something I think that needs to be done collectively, with all the key stakeholders coming together. And for example, what you're doing today with me, it actually is a really good initiative, because at least it's kind of getting this, point of view across. And
Mm,
maybe our discussion might raise some eyebrows, or maybe some people might come up with other questions or things they hadn't thought about. Maybe they might
yeah.
speak to somebody else about it. So I agree.
Definitely. Hmm.
We need this conversation to get wider, and then
Yes.
get all these stakeholders together to address these challenges, and come
Yeah.
up with policies and standards to begin with, that we can actually start enforcing, and in the long term, leading to a really balanced, innovation friendly, a good regulation.
I agree with that. And one of the biggest frustrations with the recent elections I've seen from my point of view, and obviously like I'm in this world, I think I'm working with these models every day. I'm very biased, but I I was just very disheartened by the fact there's no conversation about AI. In the um, president's election, there's no conversation about AI in our recent general election. Like, it just wasn't brought up on any of the debates. No one ever talked about it. And if they did, it'd be like a very passing comment. And I agree, it's a big issue, and it's unclear what like a Republican versus a Democrat position on AI is, and what a Labour versus Conservative, like, it's unclear, right? Like,
Mhm.
these, I don't think either party have really like a well thought out position, which obviously is helpful, because when you have a position, you debate it, and then eventually stuff can get done, as you say. Um, so talking about governments, then, like, my personal concern again, and I'm just kind of venting my personal views to you, but my personal concern is less about company regulation, because companies, most companies are run by good and honest people. They're trying to do the best for the customers. Obviously, they're trying to make a profit as well. But I think the real danger with this stuff comes from government, in my view. Like, the danger of these agentic AI models is, you know, pushing us towards totalitarianism, or if you're living in China or a totalitarian state, increased control by the government on every aspect of your life, which was completely unimaginable to Stalin or Mussolini, or like other historical totalitarian figures who actually controlled relatively little of their subjects' lives, compared to where we could be in a few years with AI monitoring your speeding and what you're eating and your carbon footprint, and like every aspect could soon be controlled by government. So do, do you like like how do you think about that, and do you think that do you agree with that actually the biggest risk of all this stuff is we kind of slide into some kind of dictatorial regimes, just because of this, how centralized AI enables power to be?
That is a risk as well. Yes, I agree, that is a risk. And then again, I keep coming back to, um, you know, standards, policies, procedures,
Mm,
regulation, actually. Because if you have a regulation, good regulation in place, the government will have to adhere to it. And the good regulation must also take this into account, that it cannot, that AI must be used to further democracy. It should not
yes.
allow you to take part in activities that are against democracy. And actually, that is a real concern, because, as you mentioned, that people were worried in the U.S. election that certain AI systems can be used to, what's the word? mislead people during the campaigning, uh,
Mm,
could lead to more people who are sitting on the fence, maybe uh, uh, voting for certain candidates on the basis of false or misinformation. So that is a real risk as well. But if you have good regulation, everybody has to abide by it, including the government, which means the government cannot um, have power over the courts.
mm.
The court's decision. And if, for example, as you said, uh, a certain policy or behavior or action or government department is seen to not comply with, you know, or is seen to, as you said, going towards, a regime which is dictatorial, or where, as you mentioned, I think what I'm understanding from you is that almost like a big brother scenario. That's what.
Yes, exactly. So my biggest fear with this stuff is, I think obviously I don't know what your view is, but like I imagine government should be involving AI and can make a lot of stuff more efficient. And given like how much debt we're in as a country, and as most countries are, like there's a lot of efficiencies and kind of gains that will come from this. I hope, and I imagine there's lots of startups working on this space, selling into governments, and hopefully they can help to bring innovation and get improvements for all of us taxpayers. So I really hope that happens, and I have no idea where that is with the UK government. I imagine slow, but on the flip side, when we talk about there I'm talking about like generative AI models. So let's say you build a new you build a new AI chatbot that will help you to assess your give you your first kind of test of where you are with your health. So rather than going to the doctor number one, you have some AI, you take some photos, it will give you like a basic analytics or whatever, and then it will send that to the doctor or to you. And so like there's probably a lot of efficiencies we can get. But more worrying for me is, okay, we have agentic AI and the government potentially rolling in its driving license with education, with tax, with health, and suddenly you have this one AI model that understands every single aspect of citizens' lives, which and therefore may not be giving people or can very easily control them. It can shut off their health. It can shut off their whatever it would be, because all these departments end up being centralized. So I think the key thing from a government standpoint is that we need to have these decentralization of agentic AI. So the Home Office does its AI, and that's Home Office, and then the NHS does its one, and that's NHS, and then police does its one, and that's police. And we don't link them, because as soon as you link them, we really are in this kind of big brother situation.
And also, it would be, you cannot do that without getting people's consent, because it's private,
Mm.
especially in the health sector. You are
Yeah.
holding very, very personal, private
Yes.
information. And
Mhm.
under the GDPR or other privacy regulations, you need to have clearly defined purpose of why you're holding that information, how long you can hold that information for. The person you're holding it for should be has a right to ask you,
Mm.
if they want the information to be deleted or to be changed or to be moved. So that is a right that human beings have, that we have rights over our personal information. And then under the regulation, this would not happen, because you would ensure that you meet certain policies, standards, and procedures where the information within a department is governed by the privacy regulations and the purposes of that department. Because what the police will be using it for will be very different to what NHS would be using it for.
Mm.
In very exceptional cases where I'm just trying to not think about exceptions where you have a very serious criminal, and that criminal is somebody who has, you have evidence against that person. That person has been convicted, and then you need some access to that person's personal health information, but perhaps that person who's been convicted is very ill, right?
Mm.
Needs medical support. So in those exceptional cases, then you would have to access the law and get permission to have access. for example.
Mm.
So you again, you have to go through the legal route to do that, and the law is the same for everybody. That's why law gives you, what's the word, good regulation gives you that's an advantage that the UK has over lots of countries. We have
Mm.
a historic legal system that has become a gold standard for so many other countries because it brings justice into society,
Mm.
so it ensures that nobody's above the law, no matter how powerful they are, no matter how successful the tech company becomes. And as you said, the tech company becomes even more successful than the government. But they should all, under the law, everybody is the same,
Mm.
so that you ensure that is proper carriage of justice, because otherwise the society will break down. If there's good law brings justice, and without justice you can't have a proper functioning society. And then you see all of the issues we see in certain countries in the developing world. A lot of their problems are due to the fact they don't have good governance, and they don't have a good legal system, and they don't have justice. They don't have
Mm.
access to justice. And we in the UK take it for granted. We're so fortunate that we have access to justice.
Yeah, 100%. Um, well, do you think, did we miss any topics that you wanted to cover? I think it's been a very interesting conversation. Don't know if there's anything else that you had in mind that you wanted to.
I think I've covered everything, and
Okay.
in fact, I think we covered more than we thought we would. I just want to leave people with this
Hmm.
positive message: is not for them to listen to all the hype around them. Do their own research and look at all the positive benefits that AI brings to
Yeah.
society, and look at how you can upskill yourself. There are lots of on Coursera. There are free courses available. I'm trying to think. Actually, the Commonwealth has come up with an AI initiative, so there are certain initiatives available where you can get free AI training. So the message I would leave people with is to upskill yourself. Your education and training is a lifelong journey.
Mm.
Something that never ends. And don't be afraid of something new coming. Uh, you know, new technology coming through. Just make yourself aware of the pros and cons, and then see how you can utilize it for your benefit. As you mentioned, there are lots of benefits to it. You can use AI to, solve some of the tasks that are very repetitive and mundane. Like doing all the spreadsheets, or in HR when you have to go through lots of different policies to come up with answers to questions such as, how much is my salary allowance after my maternity leave, or those kind of issues. So if you can use HR agents to help you within a company's HR department. It can, so that it frees up your work to come up with some more value added incentives for people rather than focusing on the mundane repetitive tasks. Then it can be used to help with things like compliance with various regulations, and making sure that your HR policies are up to date, all your standard operating procedures are up to date, as I mentioned, your KYC, your AML, the DORA, EU Act. Then you can also use it for things like customer service, where if your salespeople cannot be available 24/7, so when they're not available, you have the AI assistant to take some of the load off them, and actually help with the initial phases of the sales cycle. So then the salesperson really is there for the more value added aspect of the
Mm.
where people want to deal with you know a, a human being. So there's some and also automation. There's so many legacy systems and organizations are not working properly. They're using COBOL. They've People complain to me there are lots of issues. So AI agents can be used to transform all of that code into using the AI coding capability. So there are advantages definitely. And then, for example, you have versions of organizational enterprise level chat GPT, like for kind of applications where you use the initial ideas come from you, and you can utilize that to refine your ideas, so it saves you time. So in the past you would have to produce lots of drafts and go
Mm.
through lots of cycles, so it speeds it up. So I would say that people look at it as something that is there to benefit humanity. And where,
100%.
as you mentioned, there are certain risks, we then look to identify what the risks are, come up with a plan to address those risks.
100%.
And we can do that. Mhm.
Yeah, well, it's been great to have you on. I hope people have enjoyed the discussion. I see there's lots of comments in the live chat, so I think people on LinkedIn have been enjoying it. So hopefully on Spotify or Apple or wherever you're listening, you'll enjoy it as well. So yeah, thank you so much for being with us, Zahra, and yeah, speak to you soon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.